dream. I was flying high, I was feeling fine. I won't be put in line, 'cause I'm ready to do my time.
Welcome to the Simply Financial Podcast. This is episode number 4, season number 3. I'm your host, Christopher Calandra. On today's episode, I have a returning guest. I've known Dave a very long time. I think he was maybe the first guest on the podcast. It was episode number 5. Seems like so long ago. But today, I wanted to talk with Dave Famiglietti. He is the owner of New Frontier Armory and the founder of New Frontier Armory, located in North Las Vegas. And we are going to talk about some of our favorite books from 2018. Dave and I talk regularly. We swap ideas for books. We have different reading lists by and large, but we've had some very good conversations that are not part of the podcast, and I thought I would bring it on to do an interview with Dave about some of the books we read recently, specifically 2018. So, Dave, thanks for joining me to chat about this.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I appreciate it.
So, first off, and I'm kind of blindsiding you because we didn't prep for this, but we had this interesting conversation, you and I, about reading the actual book versus listening to the book. Because I will admit, when I say I read things, it may very well have been that I listen to it. I am a member of Audible.com. I have been for a while. I still read books, but a lot of books I listen to when I'm on the plane, I'm in the car, exercising. So if I say I read a book but I listened to it, am I being disingenuous?
I personally don't think so. I think it's the same thing. You're getting the content out of it. I have a lot of critical friends and family who even they listen to audiobooks.
Right.
But they'll correct me if I said, oh yeah, I read such and such a book last month. Well, you listened to it.
But then what do you say though? So if I say to you, hey, did you read XYZ book? Are you going to come and say, oh, I actually didn't read it, but I listened to it?
No, I'm a simple guy.
It doesn't make a difference to me.
I agree. So I told you a little bit. Actually, you put me onto Audible about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. And I started using it. And I was, like I told you, I'm not the greatest in school, not a very good reader, don't comprehend very well when I read because I think I have that entrepreneurial mind that's just constantly going in 100 directions. So it's really hard. I'll flip through 3 pages of a book and then realize I have no idea what I just read over those 3 pages and have to go back. So the audio book for me has been huge. What I'm doing is I have about an hour a day between a back and forth drive to the gym and a back and forth drive to work. And I get about an hour a day of listening. I won't say reading, listening.
Yeah.
In. So before, where I pretty much gave up on reading paper books unless it was time for bed or something, maybe 2 a year that I would get through. I'd probably start 4 and maybe read 2 actual books a year. And now I think last year I added them up for this, and I think I did 22 books that I listened to last year. So I feel like that's all information that I missed out on if I wouldn't listen to them. So
now we're recording this in Dave's office in Las Vegas. And he said he doesn't read a lot of books, but I will say that he has a book on his shelf, The Gifted Boss by Dalton. I forget his first name. But where did you get that book?
That was gifted.
That was gifted.
Great friend, yeah.
Yes. Your great friend who?
Chris.
Yes. I like to read books. I like having a book in front of me and to read. But I have a big appetite for reading or consuming books. And so if I just strictly stuck to reading, I wouldn't get to nearly the things I want to get to. By supplementing it with the listening that I could do while I'm on the move, whether it's exercise or traveling, it works out really well.
I think it's huge. From a time management aspect, that was an hour that was wasted.
Sure.
So I've spent a lot more time over the past year. I've made a conscious decision that I stopped listening to the radio and the news in the car, and I schedule phone calls for times that I know that I'll be in transit somewhere where I can use that time on a phone call that I have to make anyway, or to read, listen to these books.
So, so we're recording this, it's early 2019. Thinking back to over the last year, what would you say, well, first off, how many books do you think you read / listened to in 2018?
I think listened to them at about 22 to 24, and
Wow.
read 0.
All right. And so what was What are some of the ones that? Well, let me ask it this way: what would you say is the most impactful book? Can you point to one book you would say you would categorize as having the biggest effect on you?
I narrowed it down to about 3 or 4 that I would say were some of my favorites that I can remember. A lot of them, I'll be honest, were flops. Something that I had a catchy title, I had some good subject matter, and I thought it'd be good. And,
okay.
And then I think either it was on a different level than I would look for advice. Like it was something that remedial to me.
Sure.
And it kind of lost my interest, or it was something that I got into some more fitness and medical type stuff this year that it was way over my head and I couldn't understand and fall into. So some of the ones that stood out for me this year was Extreme Ownership. There's a book called Un-F Yourself.
Okay.
Another one, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And Leaders Eat Last. And The Four. Those were some that, like I said, if I had to remember all those 22, those would be the ones that I would actually remember.
All right, so let's go through those. Jocko, is it Willing?
Willick, yep.
Willick, I read that book, Extreme Ownership, very, very good.
Mm-hmm.
It's a leadership book based on his experience with Navy SEAL training as well as experience in the field. Very, very good. I think I may have mentioned this to you in preparation for this interview. He has a series, I don't know if it's a series, but he has at least a couple of books that are geared for children. And my son Dominic is 13, and I got him the kids' version of the book. Mm-hmm. And
that's awesome that he does that. Yeah, it's a really good book.
And all right, so that's one. And then The Four was one of the most impactful books that I read in 2018.
Yep, that was actually recommended by you.
Okay,
so
I'm
I
on a
grabbed
roll.
that. Yep.
Yeah. So what did you think of that book? I found it amazing. The Four is by the author's last name is Galloway, and it profiles the major, most influential 4 social media technology companies, they being Apple, Facebook, Alphabet, and
yes.
What am I missing?
Amazon.
Amazon, thank you.
Yeah, Apple, Amazon, Google, and Facebook.
And I found it to be a great book because it talks, Dave, about a lot of the virtues of those companies, how smart they are, how they've bettered our lives, how they competed really fiercely. And so it talked very complimentary about those companies, including the founders. But then it also spent a lot of time talking about the underbelly of that, how they are blocking out competition, about us giving away our privacy rights, a whole variety of things that the problems that are being created by these companies, especially unhealthy competition. So I thought it was fabulous. What do you think?
Yeah, it was I liked it because it did shed light on both things. It kind of made you stop and realize how giant those 4 companies are and how much they actually control right now.
Yeah.
How much influence they have on decisions you're making without you being conscious of it. How much they're really in your lives and understand what you're doing every day and patterning you, and it's crazy. I mean, it's scary for a little bit, but then it also shows look at all these conveniences we're getting out of that information gathering.
And I liked it in particular, and I don't know if you feel the same way as I do. Some things that are, I'm going to say, politically charged or controversial. You read something and it's just a hit piece and it's negative, negative, negative. No matter what, the person could save people from a burning orphanage.
Doesn't matter.
And they would be critical of it. I thought it was very fair. It was complimentary in some instances and then critical in others. I thought it was very fair, and I really enjoyed that part of, hey, here's the pros, here's the cons.
For sure.
Very even.
I like the same thing. That's why we had a discussion this morning actually at the gym about 24-hour news and the downfall of everything because of it, I think, right?
Yeah.
And how that's just polluting everybody. And we talk about, I'd rather just have information, and it's almost unfortunate that you can't really get a whole lot of good, here's an hour news recap for the world for the day.
Yes.
It's just almost not there anymore. It's going farther and farther towards opinions and whatever. So that's why I agree with you the way that book was done, where you're getting the facts, and now you can make a decision. Do you like that technology or not? Or why, or the impact it's having on us. And
all right, good. So you mentioned Leaders Eat Last.
Leaders Eat
Now,
Last.
I've heard of that book. I've never read it or listened to it, just to carry on the joke. So tell me why that book appealed to you.
So that one was the same thing, kind of similar to Extreme Ownership. It comes from the writer had a military background, and some of the stories inside kind of revolve around that. The author is Simon Sinek.
Oh, okay.
And Same kind of theory. It's that same mentality of if you can show, leading by example and showing your employees what you want from them, not just asking of them and living this entirely different life with entirely different values than you're expecting from the people around you.
So, I read another impactful book I read in late 2018 and actually straddled into 2019 was a book, When, by Daniel Pink. Mm-hmm. Have you read that?
I haven't yet.
So I had not read anything of Daniel Pink before, but it's basic, and you said it, some of the books that you might read at this stage of the game haven't been an avid reader of business books, leadership, marketing, motivation, how to be your best self-help kind of genre. This I thought was an interesting take because it really looked at the science of when to do things, not how to be rich, not how to win friends and influence people, not how to manage your time, but talked more about the science of when to do things in the day, in the project life, when to do analytical work versus non-analytical work. It looked at your sleep patterns and determined when you ought to do things, to categorize people based on their sleep patterns. So if you haven't checked that out, that's a pretty good one. I thought it was good.
I'll
When
add that
by
to my list.
Daniel Pink. So we missed one that you said with the funky name, Zebra.
Yeah, why zebras don't get ulcers.
All right, so tell me about that.
So it's one of my favorite ones. It's one of those books that it was recommended to me by a fitness coach friend of mine, and he knows that I have a pretty high stress lifestyle. I actually thrive on it at some point, but I think it does get to that unhealthy level here and there. He recommended it. Said I definitely needed to read it. I didn't really know what I was getting into when I started reading it. I knew it was something to do with stress and stress management. So I got into it, and it was one of the most simple theories and simple written books that I've ever listened to. But it was probably one of the most impactful for me. And it I've always had a pretty carefree attitude. I say I stress a lot, and I do.
Sure.
But at the same time, I'm so loose compared to other people I've known in my life that show that same level of stress. I unwind so easily as well. And I think I'm pretty carefree.
So summarize the book for me, and I'm probably going to read it because it's the name. How could you not read it after hearing that name?
So in a nutshell, it's basically talking about how we destroy ourselves with stress and overstress ourselves with things that really have nothing to do with us. It's kind of what I was talking about the 24-hour news. They use a lot of filler to constantly be bringing you material.
Sure.
And most of it pertains absolutely zero to you. You wouldn't know. You wouldn't even have an opinion on it any other way. You wouldn't care. But because they're pumping it into your head, you feel like pressured by it. You feel like it matters to you. You feel like you have to care, and you don't. And what it's talking about is how animals basically go around and they're not thinking about the stock market. They're not thinking about the news of the day. They're not thinking about what work they have to do or what they're going to cook for dinner. They're just living their lives. They live a very simple life, a very routine life. And they say, like, when they do all these tests on these animals, when animals sense fear, they stress. Then they go right back to normal afterwards. When that stress is over, when that immediate danger is not there anymore, they're going right back to a normal state. So they're much healthier overall. Overall health is much better in the animals because they don't have all this going on. So they're saying, like us, we stress about, what if this happens? What if that? We're making up stuff to stress about at that point, right? We're not saying like, well, next week I got this final exam that I have to study for. Or I have this big test at work, or I have whatever. That's something, okay, that's something is in your immediate future. And if you want to stress about it, that's a choice you make, right? But we get to the point where, like, what if during this interview, Chris asked me this question? I'm going to worry about that. What if on my way to work I get in an accident? What if this happened? What if nothing? Like, just stop and relax. So it helped me kind of realize that a little more and put a positive spin on the way I do treat things, where people might say that I'm too carefree sometimes, where maybe I don't seem to care as much as maybe I should about some important things. It's just easier that way. Deal with it when it's time to deal with it.
So is this one of these books that, because hearing you speak about it, one of these books that's kind of an easy to digest, easy to read, not terribly thick or analytical?
Super easy and not very in-depth medical-wise with terminology or anything like that. Just a super easy read and just really, really simple subject that just hits you